Welcome in. Jeremy Kahn here with you doing our daily Roto Sharks football podcast. This is the first one, so we'll be talking a little bit about the divisions, just kind of breaking everything down. I'm joined by Justin Carlucci. What's up, Justin?
Hey, not too much. Glad to be on board. Just kind of joined up with DRS a few months ago, and I'm really excited for the season.
Yeah, football is going to be fun. And we also have Sean Hoy as well. Sean, how are you?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Good, man. Good. So, look, I'm looking forward to talking some football with you guys. And, you know, obviously the preseason is underway. If you're a degenerate like me, you're already diving into the DFS preseason football. I know there's a bunch of people out there just like it. But real quick, let's start with you, Justin. You know, your approach to daily fantasy football, or even if you want to talk a little season long, I'm fine with that. But any specific strategy you look at? Do you like playing 50-50s? Are you playing tournaments, small tournaments? Baseball is a different beast. We talked a lot about that. You know, I did with Ben and CG and the rest of the guys, Scotty. It's just so different when it comes to football and how you want to approach it and how you want to make money, because there are a lot of newbies that are going to jump aboard and get into these big tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I think it's where you are in your DFS career and pretty much how educated you are. If I could do some things differently than I did when I first started playing DFS, I'd have a little bit more money, that's for sure. Really, there's no use throwing in one lineup in a 150 max $33 tournament unless you're going off the wall contrarian, or unless you want to barely double your money. You know, pretty much my advice is suck it up for the first season or two, especially if you don't put a lot of bankroll on them. Play your 50-50s, play your double ups. You know, it's not sexy. Try not to let your eyes get too big and see that massive payout in the gigantic tournaments. But, you know, when next season rolls around, you know, it pays off. You have a little bit of money to take some shots with. But I'm more of an optimal player. I try to run guys with high floors and that still have upside. It's a little chalkier, but when you play for a little bit higher stakes, eventually, you know, no one's going to try to piss money away on, you know, the 4-string wide receiver hoping he gets a touchdown at 2%. So I like guys with high floors that still have some upside, and, you know, you can't always find that, especially in smaller slates, but that's pretty much the type of DFS player I am.
Sean, let me know a little about you and how you work things just approaching football, cash games, tournaments. What do you like to do?
Well, I used to be all cash, but I started making like not nearly as much money with all the providers and all the data. So I think with all the massive fields and GPPs, I'm going to be running 20 lineups out there and trying to hit the big score. But I mean,
do you play the big tournaments, or are you playing smaller tournaments? You know, cash-wise, because but some of the guys I've talked to like to go into the bigger cash tournaments, meaning spending more to get in. The entry fees are larger because you know, you got the group that's a little bit smaller. But again, I think football is totally different, just because you got a lot of guys that want to be up on that stage holding up a gigantic check like Happy Gilmore. And I think they'll enter in and just throw in these lineups that don't differentiate, or they're not using analytics.
Yeah, I'm probably going to do like the $3 ones, but I'm also going to probably throw plenty of lineups in to like the 99 player multiplayer things, like the 50 players, whatever else, and maybe some 50-50s. But
real quick, just with me, because I think football is my best. My favorite is basketball. Football is my best. I like to think I'm really good at baseball, and then I get out there and this baseball season has just pissed me off to no end, because when I'm on the right pitching, I got the wrong hitting. When the hitting's good, the pitching sucks. But I had a football experience back when they included Monday nights, and God, I had Drew Brees and Marcus Colston, and I was in like 1800th place with the quarterback and a wide receiver stack left to go, and I'm like, man, I'm feeling great about it. Well, Brees had an excellent night, but he ended up throwing 3 touchdowns to Jimmy Graham on Monday Night Football against the Bears. I mean, I moved up to like 800th place, which won me a nice chunk of change in a $25 tournament. But I can't remember being so disappointed winning $800 in a tournament, because I thought that everything was going to be great. And the one guy that was so chalky, Jimmy Graham, was he caught 3 touchdowns. So it really didn't help me out as much as I'd have liked. But, you know, I digress. I play a lot of 50-50s and cash as well, just to try to keep my bankroll up. And that allows me to dabble in some of the tournaments and get kind of weird.
Yeah, and I might do that a little bit, but unless there's like a cash game, or a cash lineup that I make that I really like, I probably won't. Like how in week 1 it seems like everybody's 5,000, like literally everybody. It seems like is 5K.
So you get your pick of the litter and see what you like. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of battles going on, and there's still injuries that are going to be had before we get to week 1 to really open up some value. And that's the hard part, just figuring out who's going to get those carries. And then obviously in a few weeks into the season, I think analytics are really going to come in. And if you're not using them, I found out the hard way, figuring, hey, I know football. I host a sports talk show. I know basketball and baseball. Let me just dive in. And after putting a couple $1,000s in, I'm like, what the hell am I doing? And that's when I jumped aboard and started using the analytics side of things. So here's what I want to do. I want to go division by division in the NFL, just kind of a quick breakdown, see if there's any, rookies, players you like, maybe guys you'll target. We're not going to break down preseason football just yet, but, what we'll do is we'll start with the AFC and move on to the NFC. And, I know we don't have to say where you're from, Sean, but you're in the AFC North range as well. I think we all three are, right? We're all in that AFC North grouping. Let's start there. You got the Ravens, Steelers, Browns, and Bengals. Give me your thoughts. We'll start with you, Justin, and then we'll move to Sean on just this division in general and if there's anything you're going to be looking at this year.
Yeah, I mean, you know more about the Ravens than both of us for sure. And I'm really curious to see, a couple of things. I know Flacco's dinged up already, and Terrence West, who scored tonight, had a couple of really nice games last year. Danny Woodhead coming back, tearing up his leg last season. But Flacco's a check down artist, man. And, I'm curious to see what kind of shape Woodhead's in. And if you're looking at DraftKings formats or PPR and season long, we know what kind of damage Danny Woodhead can do. Can Baltimore stretch the field? I don't know. I think Danny Woodhead is a pretty damn good fit for Baltimore. That's just my initial thoughts when looking at that offense right off the bat.
Especially without Pitta.
Yeah, I mean, Pitta, captain checkdown, as Joe has been. That's his BFF, his favorite target to go to. But I think Woodhead slides in. A lot of people forget, too, they lost their fullback to the 49ers. And there's been some talk here in Baltimore about Woodhead sliding in. And basically, he was just catching the ball in the backfield. I mean, I don't know how many carries he got throughout the season, but, Woodhead's the type of guy, I think projections already had him at around 70 receptions this year, and there's a ton of receptions that go around. We know this wide receiving corps has been banged up left and right. Flacco's back injury, your guess is as good as mine, and in back injuries, they can flare up at any given moment. A lot of talk here, though. People are excited about Brashard Perriman behind the scenes. I don't know if that's a guy you can really rely on because they haven't been able to rely on him in the 3 years they've had him. But, in the running back situation's a little one thing as well. I do say this, and I know when it comes to daily fantasy, it's hard to figure out your kicker and defense sometimes. I know a lot of times people will punt that kicker position. But I will be rostering the Ravens defense. If they're healthy, I think they're going to be a top 5 defense easy. And I think it's going to take a couple of weeks before the daily fantasy projections adjust because there is a ton of talent on that side of the ball. And I think teams are going to slowly start to realize that.
Yeah, and if you want to tie in a little season-long kind of commentary with that, are you guys a fan of totally streaming defenses depending on what type of league you're in?
I mean, I am. I'm fine with it. I always wait till my last pick, but usually I try to find a defense in the top 10 that I like or I think is going to have favorable matchups, and I'll draft them in the final 2 rounds. And unless there's a scoring system that's a little bit crazy, I have a few of those. I mean, I'm in 12 fantasy leagues, which is just absurd. and then I'll just stream it and try to figure things out. Try to have a dump spot on my roster. What about you, Sean?
Yeah.
Oh, we lost your sound.
In the third to last round, but
yeah.
Broncos, Seahawks, Ravens, Texans. Take your pick for season long.
All right, well let's finish up on this division because you got a lot of big time receivers. Antonio Brown, wondering what AJ Green's going to do bouncing back. Cincinnati, to me, their offensive line lost a couple key spots. When you're talking about the interior of that line, and on top of it, Cleveland's Cleveland. So I like Duke Johnson. Sorry, man. I like Duke Johnson. I think there's a chance that I believe in season long people are drafting Isaiah Crowell just a little bit too high, but if you're in a PPR, Duke Johnson, I think, is going to have an excellent year, and I think he's going to be used similar to what Danny Woodhead's going to be used here in Baltimore. Sean, let me know your thoughts. Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. What do you like?
I mean, obviously Brown and Bell. Depending on the matchup, I'm obviously game script against the Browns week 1. Not something for Brown, I don't think. I mean, he could be huge, but might be not thrown in the second half. And Bell, I think Bell's a little banged up. Is that right?
Yeah, well, he hasn't signed his franchise tag yet, so he's waiting to the end of August, which you hope he comes in football shape if you're going to be using him in week 1 or 2 and he doesn't come out slow. But, yeah, I don't know if he's dealing with anything off season or not.
Yeah, so they might start him off slower than normal. They usually just ride him all the time. Big Ben, I forget what the numbers are, but with Martavis Bryant, he just kills it. Browns, actually, the tight end Njoku, if he gets healthy, Osweiler last year was just CJ Fedora. It's all day.
Yeah.
So we'll see what that's like. And then I read something that Duke Johnson was going to be in the slot because Hawkins isn't there anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I could see them using him all over the field. What about you, Justin, with the rest of this division?
Yeah, well, with Pittsburgh, I don't know what the home road splits were, but the Steelers laid some serious eggs on the road last year. So I think DFS-wise, that's something, even if it's a decent matchup. I just remember the Miami game with the Steelers on the road, and they were a pretty popular stack last year. I think that was Ajayi's big 200-yard performance, and that was a big goose egg. So if you laid off the Steelers that week, you probably had a payday. So I think that's interesting. I thought Eli Rogers and Roethlisberger kind of had some chemistry last year. So I'm curious to see where he falls with Martavis Bryant back in the pecking order. And obviously, like you touched on Brown and Bell, you're going to have your studs there. But the Bengals are a team, at least in season long. Everybody's drinking the Joe Mixon Kool-Aid. But there is a report today by one of the beat writers saying, no, Jeremy Hill could start all year. Like, okay. If you want to win ball games, I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm really curious to see what kind of news breaks and how that shakes out. What do you guys think about that backfield in Cincinnati?
I mean, to me, it's I think Mixon is the guy I'd end up going with and hope that if you're drafting, it happens later. But as far as daily fantasy early on in the season, I got to take a wait and see approach. I don't know that I can jump right in and just hope that I'm right. And as we talked about, percentages of people drafting on their teams, hope that there's a low ownership and then something works out. But Mixon right now with where Bernard is in his career and Jeremy Hill, he's the most talented of the bunch. But again, how much will we see?
And I think if Tyler Eifert's healthy, we've seen what kind of weapon he is, especially against soft defenses, up the middle, deep center. That's a guy, if he's 100%, I think maybe with tight ends pretty deep this year, especially in season long. And you could probably, get Tyler Eifert at a pretty decent price tag.
Well, and Sean, real quick on that, because, it's funny to me that Cincinnati drafted a bunch of speedsters. They got Tyler Boyd from last year, and then they go out and they get Ross. I'm not sure Andy Dalton's arm can get the ball down the field to those guys, but I mean they'd still be able to stretch the defense. AJ Green is interesting because I almost feel like he's that top tier receiver that maybe a couple guys have leapt him in some drafts, like Mike Evans, and depending on where you put Jordy Nelson, a year removed from his ACL injury, and there's a handful of other guys in that group, Mike Thomas with the Saints, but AJ Green's a guy that can seriously, in a tough division with tough defenses, can put up numbers.
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to be blowing anyone out, so they might be airing it out a lot of the games, especially against the Steelers and the Ravens. I mean, the Ravens, they're tough, but they're probably going to have to throw. And AJ Green, he's got the downfield potential and to burn any corner, essentially.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to let's go to the AFC South. Full disclosure, I'm a Colts fan, even though I live in Baltimore. So, yeah, I do not hide it. Ravens fans during football season hate my guts for it. I'm a Peyton Manning apologist, so it is what it is. But that being said, Andrew Luck's all banged up. I don't know what that means for some of the guys like T.Y. Hilton, Dante Moncrief's banged up as well. When you start looking at the Titans, who we were briefly talking about before we started recording, I think all three of us really like them. The interesting thing will be what happens with that running back situation. DeMarco Murray, hell of a running back, and as long as he holds up, should be pretty good. But many people think Derrick Henry could be banging on that door, and their young receiver they drafted, Corey Davis. Then you look at the AFC South with Houston. It's funny to me because the hot takes were in. Deshaun Watson's going to the Hall of Fame after his preseason game. It just drives me crazy. But waiting to see if DeAndre Hopkins gets back, in that mix. We were just talking about AJ Green, and then on top of it, you throw in that running back situation there. Are you buying in the Lamar Miller? Anyone else? And in Jacksonville, you figured out. But I do like Leonard Fournette. I don't know what happened to Allen Robinson last year. Let's start with you, Sean. As we look at the AFC South, give me your thoughts.
Honestly, I don't really trust the Colts or the Jags. And even though Savage or whoever is going to be the Houston quarterback, I like some guys on Houston. Like DeAndre Hopkins can make a play. Braxton Miller's coming out of the woodwork. Lamar Miller, who's really cheap week 1 for some reason, he's a workhorse. Tennessee, I love Mariota. I think they're going to win the division. Corey Davis, Decker. I think Rashard Matthews, they still have him. Delaney Walker at tight end, 2 good running backs. They're just set up right now, in my opinion.
What about you, Justin?
Well, I'm a Titans fan, so maybe we could have some friendly side bets going on this season. Any team but the Colts, man. Come on. I'm just kidding. But I think the offensive line in Tennessee is big in this division because you got the Jags. I know everybody's been drinking the Jags Kool-Aid the past couple of years, but that defense is starting to be for real. So I'm really glad Tennessee has that offensive line, and obviously we know what the Texans have up front too. But I'm getting some bad vibes with Corey Davis. I mean, it's not good that he's dinged up so early. Obviously, as a rookie, you want to have him in right away, learn the playbook and get in the feel. I know he came out of the MAC, and some people are knocking that, but I think the biggest signing was Eric Decker, and everything in camp, all the reports are saying he looks really good. He's making some great catches. Mariota's yet to throw a red zone interception going into his 3rd year, which is unbelievable. And with, to tail off of how much you like Mariota, adding a guy like Decker in the red zone who had some good success 2 years ago with complete shit quarterback play. I mean, he was a monster, especially for DFS at his tag. I think for the first couple of weeks, you can get Eric Decker cheap, and even in season long, have some depth because, the Titans have one of the easiest strengths of schedules, as do most of the teams in that division. But I'm buying Decker early in the season for sure.
My favorite thing about Mariota when he was drafted, that all the teams were worried about him because he had no red flags. Like, he's like the nicest guy ever. And they thought something has to be wrong with him if they can't find anything wrong with him. So, but yeah, I mean, that division is kind of a crapshoot of who's going to win it. I remember a few years ago betting on the Jaguars to get over 3.5 wins. They had 1 win all the way up until like week 14 or week 13, and then they got back-to-back wins. And I'm going, oh, I'm in this. And yeah, they got the rest of the year. So they flirted with me just enough to keep me interested. But yeah, at some point they got to put it together and figure it out. I mean, I do like Fournette. I think his big thing is staying healthy, in my opinion. And if Blake Bortles turns out to be the turd that I think he is, then they're just going to stack the box against him as well. So I guess you'll have to pick your poisons in those spots when you're looking at Jacksonville and what weapons to attack. Marquise Lee seems to be the number 2 there, by the way, kind of leaping over Allen Hurns. I think some of that started last year at the end of the season with Hurns' injury, but something to look at. And but it'll be an interesting division top to bottom this year.
I was going to ask you about the Colts. People see T.Y. Hilton, PPR machine, only had 6 touchdowns, though. Was that a case of bad variance? Because he led the team in red zone looks. So,
yeah, I mean, I think he can kind of do it all, even though he's small. But they don't have – it'd be nice to have a few bigger targets. We talked about, opportunities with Dwayne Allen gone now. You got Jack Doyle there who kind of – I mean, he was my punt tight end a few weeks, and you hope he catches that touchdown. He had a few big games last year, so maybe he gets more of those targets because Andrew Luck doesn't really have – he likes throwing to the tight end even in college, but right now he doesn't have those big wide receivers to go to. They're a bunch of midgets, he's got the little guy. So.
Yeah, I like Jack Doyle in the red zone for sure.
All right, let's go AFC West here and talk to some of the teams out there because San Diego, I heard a bunch of reports on them.
Los Angeles.
Yeah, Los Angeles. I can't get used to that. Even the Angels trying to call themselves, they're the Anaheim Angels. I mean, if you want to call yourself the California Angels, whatever. But so San Diego, Denver, Kansas City, and who am I missing here?
Oakland.
The Raiders. Oh, yeah, of course. Las Vegas, is that what you want to call them? Or staying with Oakland for right now? But a lot of interesting teams here, and I think another division where many people are going to jump on Oakland's bandwagon for what they were doing last year. If Carr's healthy, the playoffs could be a lot more interesting. But that's clearly a high-class offense. You're talking about Crabtree, throwing in Amari Cooper, the running game there. I don't know if you guys are buying into Marshawn Lynch taking a year off and coming back. I'm not necessarily feeling it, but more power to you if you are. But when it comes to daily fantasy, it's more about opportunity and the matchup. Kansas City, young running back there that a lot of people are jumping aboard on. You look at that offense and what they're capable of. I like a lot of the defenses out that way, but I do think San Diego is going to be a team I target a ton. I love Phillip Rivers. He's a guy I love to hate, but when it comes to fantasy, it just seems like he gets it done. Keenan Allen's healthy. And Hunter Henry's another guy that I just heard rave reviews about, even with Antonio Gates there. And then the big question with Denver is, what's that offense going to look like? They're going to run the football with Gary, in that Gary Kubiak type system that they've had in that running game. I don't think they're changing that, even though they're changing coaches. But you look at the quarterback situation. What do you trust? Demaryius Thomas is a top-notch receiver. So is Emmanuel Sanders. And from a statistical standpoint, they both were kind of trash last year.
Yeah.
Give me your thoughts, Sean.
Well, I like the Chiefs a lot and the Raiders. So we'll start with the Chiefs. Tyreek Hill, I'm on him. He just looks like a total athlete. Does everything. You can double dip with the Chiefs defense, even because he returns, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And then Spencer Ware seems like a workhorse, especially. I know that I forget who that young guy is, but I think it's Spencer Ware's job to start.
Yeah, we'll adjust accordingly with DFS. It will depend on what happens.
Still wait and see. I'd wait and see. But Kelsey, or however you say his name.
Yeah.
Top tier tight end. And then, I'm not buying Marshawn Lynch yet. I don't really see much PPR value there. And, I like Carr.
Carr's another one of those guys that, very similar to like the Saints and the Redskins. I'd even put them in there with the offensive lines that they have. The Raiders are in that group where they should be able to run the ball efficiently no matter who's in the backfield. And on top of that, that's going to give Carr plenty of time to make some plays down the field. And Crabtree's an excellent red zone target, and Amari Cooper should be this third season coming into his own and one of the upper echelon receivers in this league.
Jared Cook too. I think they have him at tight end now. He's actually, he had Aaron Rodgers last year, but he showed what he can do when he has an actual quarterback. And he's got another one now.
Justin, what are your thoughts on just what we're talking about with the AFC West? And when you're looking at the running backs, Hunt is the kid that we were talking about, the running back for Kansas City that many people think is going to end up taking Spencer Ware's job. But pump your brakes. Andy Reid likes those reliable guys, and although Spencer Ware is nothing to write home about, I still think he is one of those very reliable players that Reid likes.
Yeah, I'm pumping my brakes a little too. I'm definitely trying to handcuff. If you go out of your way to get Spencer Ware, you got to try and get that handcuff, even if you draft him at an earlier round, season long than you'd like to. That might not be the best avenue to go. It's funny you say that because I still can't believe the massive trade up they made on draft day. That was crazy. I want to get you guys' thoughts.
I'm sorry, man. I don't mean to interrupt, but everybody was talking about Trubisky and what the Bears gave up. For the Kansas City Chiefs, who were the number 2 seed in the AFC last year, to go and trade away future picks,
so many assets,
quarterback that comes out of a spread offense that's never taken a snap under center, and not to just diminish what Texas Tech, Baylor, Washington State, all these spread schools do. You're going to take this guy and tell me you're going to – everybody's talking about Andy Reid. Oh, he grooms quarterbacks. Who? When? Donovan McNabb? You talking about a top 3 pick? He groomed him, or a top 5 pick? Brett Favre when he was in Green Bay. Come on, man. It's so bogus. I hated what Kansas City did in going after Mahomes. But
I was going to say future assets, and this is a league that's built through the draft, and you're severely lacking playmakers on the offensive end of that football as it is, and you're just going to yield your next future couple of draft picks. That was absolutely absurd to me. So I don't understand that at all. And let's face it, how Alex Smith manages games. He's a reliable, and that's what Andy Reid likes. But eventually, you're going to have to stretch the field, and this league is a passing league, and everybody knows it. Andy Reid's a passing guy. We know that. It just is peculiar to me what the hell happened there too. But like you said, I'd tread carefully with the running back situation there. In Denver, as trash as Simeon and Paxton Lynch probably are going to be this year, Emmanuel Sanders still had 1,000 yards, and he's getting his ADP, according to Fantasy Pros, was like the 39th or 40th receiver off the board. I mean, I'll take him for some depth. Maybe you can stream him in the right matchup. So I wouldn't completely shy away from Sanders. He's a bubble screen guy. Anybody could throw a bubble screen. Maybe he'll break one loose in the right matchup. The Chargers are interesting too. I mean, I think we could talk about them a little more because Melvin Gordon, despite a horrible line, and that was injury plagued, he was a red zone monster. And I'm glad you mentioned Hunter Henry. If you look at some of the advanced stuff, his success rate over the middle and everything just absolutely trumps what Antonio Gates, was able to do last year. And I know they want to get him a couple of touchdowns, to get the accolades and everything. But, man, if you want to win some games, I think Hunter Henry is the movement this year.
Yeah, and, just real quick, just talking about San Diego, because we'll see if it happens later in the year. It might be a guy at stash, but I heard Adam Kaplan talking about it today on Fantasy Radio that Andre Williams, the old Giants running back, the kid from Boston College, has slimmed down, and he looks fantastic there. And he may end up stealing some of those backup carries. And if anything should happen to Melvin Gordon or things aren't working out, maybe we do see Andre Williams, or maybe he just becomes one of those goal line guys as well, or short yardage situations. So that might be something to keep your eye on. All right, let's go to the AFC East, my least favorite division. I hate the Patriots with a passion, so I won't have anything nice to say. But from a fantasy standpoint, I don't shy away from drafting any team. They had Brandon Cooks, which I'm very curious to see how they use him. And you look at some of the other weapons, Edelman, Gronkowski, if he's healthy. People love to target those guys, especially in DFS. And then on top of it, you start looking at the Jets. I don't know what you do there, where you're looking, what you're going to the quarterback play is just awful.
That's not the only thing that's awful, man.
Well, I mean, the Bills. So you look at them, and there's some weapons on offense. It'll be intriguing to see how they use some things. Tyrod Taylor, a lot of the running quarterbacks, I'll target them in DFS if they're on the cheap and hope I get a couple touchdowns, maybe some rushing yards from them as well. And down on the goal line, maybe you can punch a few in. And then try to allocate my money elsewhere. And I know a lot of people have done that, but I've even taken some pretty crappy quarterbacks that will take off and run depending on the matchup. Now, the other thing I wanted to bring up is Miami, and that'll be interesting because I don't want to call myself a Jay Cutler apologist. I feel like people bang on him way too much. He does have a 10-cent head, but I'm interested to see how Devontae Parker's used because he does have a strong arm. He's able to get the ball down the field. And he will throw it up there no matter what team, but I'll take it when it goes to Parker a couple times. And then you look at that running back situation there, Jay Ajayi, wondering about his knees, if he's going to hold up for a full season. He looked great last year, and he's a guy that I kind of shied away from. Let's start with you, Justin, AFC East. What do you like?
Oh, man. Looking at the Patriots, I'm season-long wise, I love the tight end position. It's deep, so I'm not one to pay up for Gronkowski, especially with the injury risk he presents. I'm not willing to, give it, a third-round selection for a guy that might go down in week 4. I don't know. You just don't know. I think it's risky. And there's a lot of mouths to feed there, man. I did read something really interesting on New England, which kind of pertains to some matchups. Over the last 3 seasons when they played top 10 run defenses, I think they're 5-1. And that's, you hear a lot of teams say we do what we do. They stick to their identity. But when New England plays top 10 run Ds the last 3 years, they pass 72% of the times. I think they average 28 pass plays in the first half. So, I mean, they're going to throw the ball. They're going to – I mean, it's – everybody says Belichick's a genius. I hate the Patriots too. But, they attack teams the way they should be attacked. I'm not saying they do it without cheating, but I mean, they do what they do. I don't know how Cooks is gonna, fare in a system that has Gronkowski and Edelman, and Brady loves throwing to those running backs too. They're gonna get James White's gonna get his fair share of targets too, and if Deion Lewis is healthy, it just seems like a mess there. I mean, fantasy wise, obviously Brady's a stud, but I don't like investing in someone that I know is not gonna get a ton of targets or a ton of volume, and I think it's kind of a wait-and-see approach for DFS too.
What about you, Sean?
I'm pretty much the same with the Patriots. Just so many weapons. Just wait and see. Just like I'm just gonna hold off on the Patriots and the Jets because it's like the opposite side of the coin. Miami with Cutler. Maybe dumping it off to Julius Thomas a little bit, maybe relying on Ajayi a little more. Maybe he throws some picks way up there, I mean, we're still waiting on Landry with his domestic violence thing, right?
Yeah.
And then, what is it, the Bills? Shady. maybe getting a little old, but that line seems to hold up pretty well. And they don't have too many weapons, so I'd look at Shady a little bit and maybe Tyrod for GPPs.
Yeah, all that makes a ton of sense. And again, all the things we're saying here is just generic stuff because everything's all about the matchup when we get into, any week when it comes to daily fantasy. All right, let's we'll finish up with the AFC. Anything that you guys missed that you want to bring up, Justin?
I was just about the Dolphins. I don't know how to feel about Ajayi. I mean, the guy could get 300 carries, but if you find the right advanced stats, I'm not saying that it labels him as having a lucky season, but there's a lot of games where he was bottled up, and then a missed tackle here or there, and he had like a 70-yard score. But I mean, if Adam Gase is going to run the football, he likes protecting horrible quarterback plays with running the ball. I think when Adam Gase called plays the last 2 times in a ton of volume, he ran the ball like second most in the NFL. So I don't know how to feel about Ajayi. I really don't. I think in DFS it's going to be a week-to-week thing. I don't know if I'm ready to lock him in for a season-long first-round draft pick, especially if you're looking at PPR. There's a ton of receivers. So there's a lot of teams that we're going to have to wait and see. And I think the Dolphins are one of them, especially with the Jarvis Landry thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sean, anything else that you think you missed on the AFC before we go NFC?
Just maybe Jesse James got overlooked, but he's just a cheap option. Might catch a few balls. Could be a red zone target, but he's not going to get the targets that like Jack Doyle will probably get. So
I was going to ask you, Jeremy, what's up with the Colts backfield? I mean, Frank Gore is seriously testing father time, but there's a lot of guys behind him. You got any inside scoop on what might shake down there?
No, it's funny because I thought for sure, and I was even saying this past year that I would have loved to seen Dalvin Cook end up there. But, I mean, there's just a who's who of nobodies. And I think you're going to have to play that accordingly each week. The names that we've seen, Ferguson, Turbin, Kristen Michaels bounced around. But Frank Gore has been – look, as old as he is, he's been Mr. Reliable, and he's a guy that was often hurt when he first got in the league. So, I really don't know what they're going to do. And they're a team that needs to focus on up front, first off, protecting the quarterback and having a sound running game so you can set up the play action. In years past, it's just been – it seems like everybody's running a 9 route and taking the top off the defense, and Andrew Luck holding on to the ball until you can't hold on to it any longer and throw it up. And that's just no way to get anything done. So, it'll be interesting. And I'm still not totally 100% positive what they're going to end up doing as far as running back goes. All right, let's move on to the NFC here. We'll start in the NFC East. That's one of everybody's favorite divisions. Always some turmoil there. The Cowboys kind of a bit of a surprise last year. I was all aboard the Ezekiel Elliott train. I kept saying, even with the Ravens, I'd love to see them draft him because I just think he's a different player. We are seeing some of his immaturity here as he's been in trouble yet again. And as you look at Ezekiel Elliott, we don't know if he'll be suspended. They're saying something should come down in the next few days. But you look at that team, Dez Bryant. I don't love the depth of the wide receivers. I mean, Cole Beasley's a nice player, but when you talk about that Dallas offense, I think they need another receiver in that mix to kind of help them out, and I don't think that's there. Their defense is shoddy at best, and they got one of the better kickers in the league. When you talk about the Giants, Brandon Marshall's there now. We saw Sterling Shepard went down with an injury. We all know what ODB's capable of doing. Odell Beckham is just fantastic and can win you daily fantasy on his own sometimes, it seems like, when he has those huge games. And then you look at the Eagles. That offense is going to be intriguing because that backfield's loaded. They add LeGarrette Blount. How do they use them? The DFS nightmare, in my opinion, when you're talking about who's running the football. Wide receivers galore, adding Torrey Smith, Alshon Jeffrey, and Jordan Matthews is still there. So some decisions to be made. And lastly, the Redskins, who I keep looking up. They're playing the Ravens tonight. But the Redskins, some weapons on offense. Jordan Reed's, he's got to stay healthy. He had his foot problems last year. And now you add in a Terrell Pryor and Kirk Cousins. How do things go with him? So, and that running back is that there's a logjam there as well to try to figure out. Sean, let's start with you on the NFC East and what you like, what you don't. Give me your thoughts.
So there's probably going to be a lot of Eli people now with Brandon Marshall and that stack. Honestly, I don't know who's going to win the division this year because Dallas looked really good. The Giants were right there, and then Philly is improving. So we'll see who wins the division. But Waiting for the Zeke suspension news is a big deal. Basically, if Zeke's out, I like Dez. If Zeke's in, I don't like Dez. That's the way that works. I don't really trust any of the other guys, even though Prescott ended up liking Beasley a little bit last year. I'm actually a big Kirk Cousins guy, even without it, with everyone leaving, because Terrell Pryor looks like a beast.
You got Jameson Crowder.
Yeah.
Crowder's in the slot, and then Doxson looks like he can run a fly route, and Jordan Reed in the red zone. And then Eagles, Blunt behind that offensive line is interesting, but I don't really see any PPR upside, so we'll just see if they can get it in close and just jam it in.
Yeah. Justin, what are your thoughts on the division?
Well, with Dallas, I find it funny. What were they? A 13-win team, and Vegas has them at like 9 or 9.5. I mean, that's got to be a red flag right there. Let's face it, Vegas is taking all of our money from time to time. So if you're telling me they're a 9 and 9.5 win team this year, right up from the get-go as some odds, I don't know. We got to wait on the Zeke suspension, obviously. Cole Beasley is an option for PPR. But I'm not a huge Cowboys guy for targeting anyone for DFS outside of Zeke. The Giants did nothing to address their offensive line issue. Nothing. So you can talk all you want about the guys they got on the outside, but if Eli sucks when he has no time to throw the ball. There's no nice way to put it. And how are you going to run the ball? I mean, offensive line wins you games. Let's put it there. And you look at the Eagles, who have a pretty good front seven, and they're trying to hide their totally horrible secondary, but they can maybe against a team like the Giants if they play it the right way. So it's definitely going to be some interesting week-to-week matchups. The Redskins, like you said, Rob Kelly, I guess, had the advantage early on. We're going to see what the other kid can do tonight. Kirk Cousins, I actually like Kirk Cousins too. I'm a big Jamison Crowder guy.
Yep.
So, now that Garcon's gone and everybody, and Jordan Reed's going to get hurt eventually. It's just the way it is. Between his foot, he's concussion prone, and I love Jordan Reed. He's a monster, but he's another one of those risky tight ends. I guess my main thing I'm preaching that personally is I'm waiting on tight ends this year because I feel like I talked about 3 or 4 guys that have red flags, but I feel like any team in this division could go 6-10 or 10-6, and it's gonna. With the Eagles, they were 1-7 on the road last year, and they play 3 games out in the Pacific time zone, and it's not traditionally teams don't play well when you rewind the clock and go all the way out there. So a lot of uncertainty with just a couple of weeks left before the season. What do you think, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, the old adage with the playoffs, I mean, you got 12 teams, it's always 5 out, 5 in. So 5 new teams every year and trying to figure out who it's going to be. That doesn't mean I'm sitting here telling you that the Dallas Cowboys aren't going to make the playoffs, but I do think that division is going to stack up a lot differently than what it did last year, and it's not going to be them walking all over everyone. Now, you've seen Dak Prescott for a year. We've heard about the sophomore slumps from quarterbacks, and what do they try to do with Dak? Do they try to keep him in the pocket, make him throw? All different types of things that could happen this year. I am concerned about Dez. I know you kind of bring it up. I mentioned that depth at wide receiver, and he's a guy that, too, he often gets hurt, and he wears his emotions on his sleeve just like anybody else. And the Eagles, to me, are the most intriguing team of the group because I like Carson Wentz. I don't know what he's going to become. He might be a guy I target depending on the matchup for daily fantasy. But that being said, I still think there's a ton of weapons for him this year. Tight ends, running backs, bunch of stuff to play with. There's a lot of mouths to feed, and hopefully nobody there is complaining. Alshon Jeffrey joining the fold as well. So intrigued by them a lot.
Yeah, oh, my bad. You can
go ahead, Sean. Go ahead.
All right. Well, week 1's going to be interesting because I'm still trying to figure out who Norman's going to cover, whether it's Jeffrey or Matthews. But season long wise, Wentz could be a steal late. Like he's got the offensive line, he's got the running backs to open up the passing game, and he's got 2 good wide receivers and a pretty solid tight end in Ertz.
Yeah. So I think Norman's more than likely he's going to have to be on Jeffrey because the way they're talking about using Jordan Matthews is in the slot. So
yeah,
Norman's not a guy unless he's following around OBJ that he's going to start moving around all of a sudden. They normally just keep him on the outside. But Torrey Smith's another guy, too, that you could see him matched up with Norman, not because they want to do that, but he's a guy that can clearly get down the field. He's still pretty quick. But that being said, it's going to be really interesting to see how Philadelphia sets everything up with their offense. Let's move on to the NFC West because, we look at Seattle and the weapons they have there. Jimmy Graham, everybody expecting to go there. Russell Wilson to get this great weapon. Wilson, to me, he's a boomer bust guy. He either has that game where, and maybe it's the running back punching in a couple times, where he has 150 yards passing and, you know, 1 TD, or he comes out and he just lights you up and he wins the day for you. But hoping to see Jimmy Graham back out there performing, even though that SOB, I feel like he cost me a tournament. But anyway, then you start looking at the Rams. Their offense has just been absolutely dreadful. I am interested to see what Todd Gurley does this year, because I know everybody's going to be down on him for season long. I think he slides in the draft, and he'll probably be a guy that I target and hope that there's some upside there. Arizona, can Carson Palmer come back? There's still a ton of weapons. We all know about David Johnson. The guy's absolutely amazing, and then he's almost a cash game play every week, no matter who they're playing. And then, you know, when you start looking at San Francisco, the running back situation leaves a little bit to be desired. Brian Hoyer there. You know, the NFC West, as far as fantasy goes, isn't totally appealing to me outside of David Johnson. But, Justin, give me your thoughts on what you see out there.
Yeah, I've had a bunch of Seahawks the last couple of years in the keeper league I run, and it's been a Jekyll and Hyde relationship for sure. I think you nailed it with Wilson being kind of boomer bust. Everybody's saying he played the entire year last year, kind of dinged up, and he ran for his life almost every play. But Doug Baldwin, that's the guy who I think is probably a little underappreciated. His targets and his receptions have went up every year he's been in the league. And last year, Jimmy Graham, Pete Carroll came out and said they monitored him and you know, really reduced his snap count last year. So he could be a weapon. I know you're not a fan of him, but Jimmy Graham could really do some damage, you know, in this division. You know, the run game, obviously.
I think Jimmy Graham is one of the best weapons in football, period. It just amazes me that the guy was leading the league in touchdowns and all of a sudden gets traded to Seattle, and they can't figure out how to get him the ball and use him in the offense. And then, oh, by the way, when they started to figure things out just a little bit, that's when he ends up getting hurt.
Yeah, he throws a temper tantrum in the locker room, and then next week comes out, I think he was pushing 100 yards. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Seahawks shake out. But like you said, Gurley, I mean, people will be down on him. Personally, I don't know if I'm willing to, you know, in season-long leagues to take a risk on him. DFS-wise, you want to go contrarian maybe the first couple of weeks and take a shot, go for it. Moving to Arizona real quick, like you said, David Johnson. I like J.J. Nelson. I think that's the guy who can be sneaky, you know, as good as Larry Fitzgerald is. He's one of my favorite players, but, you know, Father Time's catching up to him as well. We thought John Brown was going to step in and be the new favorite, you know, deep threat and kind of fly pattern guy, but that didn't necessarily work out last year. So I think Nelson's worth a late flyer in most leagues. And, you know, the 49ers, oddly enough, I kind of like Pierre Garçon in some PPR leagues for like some depth. And, you know, if maybe not in a GPP tournament, but if you're stacking up going stars and studs, he's pretty cheap. And Brian Hoyer doesn't throw the ball very far, and Pierre Garçon doesn't run very far. He's kind of that underneath guy. So I think he's worth, you know, maybe taking a look at later in your drafts or maybe in some DFS lineups.
Tom, what do you think?
Well, I think Wilson, I mean, is all matchup dependent, but he seems to only go off when Baldwin goes off for the most part. So that's like, you might want to have like one GPP stack with those two, just no matter what, and that's it. And then I think I'm going to wait and see a little bit, but I might get some Eddie Lacy week 1 back in Lambeau to start, and he's allegedly in shape finally.
No Chinese food.
So let's see who else. Oh, David Johnson. I'm not going to trust the Cardinal passing game, but David Johnson seemed like every single week last year you had to have him, or you were just done before you even started. San Fran. I'm with on the Pierre Garçon train there. With
yeah,
he doesn't throw that far, but there's rumor that Carlos Hyde might be catching some balls out of the backfield too. So that's something
I look low too, right? Because I look at the depth chart and I'm going, yikes. And I think you may have hit the nail on the head, Justin. It's not one of those sexy things drafting Pierre Garçon, but it's like, where else is the ball going? I mean, I could see Hoyer or whoever ends up getting most of the snaps there. I mean, it's going to be Hoyer in the beginning, but just force feeding him and just constantly throwing the ball. So he might be a PPR machine this year.
I want to pick your guys' brains real quick. First overall pick, David Johnson or Bell, where are you going? Does it matter what format you're in, season long league, personal preference? I mean, I know Bruce Arians came out and was like, I want to get this guy 300 touches, trying to stir the pot a little bit. So where do you go? You got that first overall pick in your draft. Who do you go with?
Me personally, I'm going David Johnson. I love what Le'Veon Bell does. Him coming to camp late scares me. He has been injured, even though David Johnson got hurt at the end of the year last year. But they both do the same thing, catching the ball out of the backfield, and they run the football. But when I look at a chance to play, San Francisco and the capabilities Arizona's going to have out there to beat up on some teams, and because of they spread the offense and they throw it downfield a ton, it opens up so much for him. And you could say the same thing about Pittsburgh, but if we want to sit here and look at it and say David Johnson's going to see Seattle twice, I don't think it really matters. Le'Veon Bell's going to see the Ravens twice. They're both solid players, and I don't think you go wrong with either one. But I'm David Johnson personally.
Yeah, I'm going to go David Johnson. I think if Tomlin knew what he was doing, he'd lay back on Bell a little bit because he's been hurt in the playoffs last 2 years. And the year that the Broncos won the Super Bowl, C.J. Anderson was like splitting carries, and we were like, what is he doing, like splitting all these carries? And then he went off in the Super Bowl.
You can't go wrong, really. The Ezekiel Elliott thing, I think for guys that are in the standard leagues waiting for a suspension, we were talking about LaShawn McCoy earlier, and I was just talking to a buddy about him saying, I can't draft him. Because, he's over 30 now, and I'm just waiting for the injury. And if I get burned by not drafting him, because the way I figure it is, I'm either getting LaShawn McCoy or Mike Evans, A.J. Green, maybe Odell Beckham, somewhere in that group. And I'd rather be wrong on that receiver than that running back personally. But there's going to be a ton of carries and a ton of touches for him. But I just keep waiting for that injury. And I know that's not the proper way to look at it, but that's how I feel.
It's realistic.
Yeah. Hey, all right. So let's go on to the NFC South. This is a division where Atlanta 28-3. I still can't. Yeah, that's so stupid. Just run the damn ball already. But they signed Devontae Freeman to an extension. Tampa Bay seems to be everybody's darling. You look at Carolina, can they bounce back? And the Saints, from a DFS standpoint, you got to love them. So in this division, we're talking big-time wide receivers: Julio Jones, Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson's down there now in Tampa Bay. In Carolina, does Kelvin Benjamin get back in the mix? Oh, by the way, we talked about tight ends. Greg Olson's, one of Cam Newton's favorite targets. On New Orleans side, Mike Thomas. There's so many weapons. Adrian Peterson joins the division. I just mentioned Deshaun Jackson. Christian McCaffrey there now, depending on how they decide to use him. And I think in that read option, that's just going to be deadly if once they kind of figure out what they want to do offensively. But it does seem like Tampa Bay's everybody's darling, jumping on famous Jameis, and O.J. Howard's there now. So let's start with you, Sean. Give me your thoughts on the NFC South and who you like.
Yeah, there's just so much here compared to the North or the West that we just did. So the Saints, Michael Thomas is going to be everybody's go-to for Breeze. But I think Snead might sneak in there, and maybe even Ginn, but mostly Snead, I think, because he's already got that chemistry with Breeze. Fleener seems banged up, but again, Breeze likes his tight ends as he did with Graham. Winston and the Bucks, we'll see. O.J. Howard, Cameron Brate, I kind of want to wait and see, but I might have some Howard to start. He's just got all the weapons now. Like Vincent Jackson, Howard, and Mike Evans are all 6'6". And he's got Deshaun Jackson just running around, doing whatever the hell he wants out there. The Panthers. I'm going to wait and see on the Panthers.
Julio Jones and the Atlanta Falcons. That's
everyone's going to be on Team McCaffrey to start, but we don't know what's going to happen there exactly yet, I don't think. Benjamin looks good. Olsen's Newton's favorite target ever. And then the Falcons, I think they do run it. They got two dangerous backs in Freeman and Coleman, and it seemed like last year it didn't even matter who was in the red zone. They were just whoever was out there. If they were just run the offense, they're just going. So the touchdowns are kind of like 50-50 in that regard, in my opinion. And then obviously Ryan to Julio is like the most famous stack ever.
Everybody loving it. Sorry, I got caught up. I just looked up. I think Justin Tucker for the Ravens just kicked about a 60-yard field goal.
And Austin Hooper. Austin Hooper, the tight end, looks good.
That's definitely a guy I think is going to get some targets in that offense with Julio getting a ton of attention. So that Ravens defense I talked about earlier, by the way, pitching a shutout in preseason. Not to get caught up on hot takes, but so give me your thoughts, Justin. NFC South, because this is a division you can go from last to first, and it's happened almost every single year over the past 5 or 6 years.
I don't want to state the obvious. I was trying to double check the schedule of what I saw the other day, but my internet's like a hamster on a wheel here in Pennsylvania. But I do believe the Saints and Falcons play twice in weeks 14 through 16, and that's fantasy football playoffs. So I don't want to be Captain Obvious, but load up on your Falcons and your Saints if you have the opportunity to, because you're going to have, a sick point total in those two matchups, which is crunch time, baby. I mean, that's where the money's made in annual leagues. And obviously, you're going to see some chalk ownerships in DFS those weeks. But I heard great things, or I read great things that Drew Brees was saying about Ted Ginn, who's going to actually have a quarterback who throws a great deep ball. Going to have some options there. Last year, if we're looking at week 1, Carolina might be a little wait and see. And I know they're playing across the country, but Greg Olsen torched the Niners last year. I know that game was at home, I believe. So you can probably get decent ownership on him with how deep tight end is, I would imagine, too. But I don't know. I'm not buying the McCaffrey hype in annual leagues. I'm not ready to risk and pay up, because I still got Jonathan Stewart there. I know he's on the wrong side of his career. But, I mean, let's face it. What do you have, 7 or 8 carries? And, he's a high-end first-round pick. I don't know. I'd love to have the chance to just wait and see. I think I would just steer clear of that. And who am I missing here? Atlanta, I mean, Hooper, he's going to have a lot more opportunities to catch football over the middle, and obviously Matt Ryan. I'm not a fan of drafting a quarterback early, no matter what year it is. Matt Ryan might actually be fifth, sixth, seventh quarterback off the board, maybe.
Yeah.
And if you can draw me 2 Saints matchups in the playoffs, and maybe you get a decent backup that if you ever have to stream a guy or fill in for Matt Ryan bye weeks, I mean, I'm loving Matt Ryan in any format all the time. I know it sounds stupid and obvious, but load up, baby, load up.
Yeah, and I think Tevin Coleman torched the Saints last year on the road.
Yeah, and depending on how much they decide to use him, I know they just signed Freeman to that big contract, but the Saints have the Falcons have no problem riding the hot hand. If Coleman's coming in and tearing away and he gets down there the goal line, they'll give him the carries, and Freeman. He might have to punch him in from out and about, and both guys catch the ball in the backfield, actually, pretty decent. All right, let's move on to the NFC North. What do we say about the Bears? It's almost like talking about the 49ers. At least that's how it feels for me. I do like Jordan Howard, but again, what are teams? I like Jeremy Langford coming into last year, and I think Jeremy Langford is Swahili for Jordan Howard. So it feels like the same situation. Howard's an interesting cat. But teams are going to gear up to stop him, and whoever's back there slinging the football, to you, because I don't know who they're throwing the ball to and how the success is going to go in Chicago. There won't be much. Minnesota, Sam Bradford, another captain check down. I think everything he throws is underneath, but there are some weapons there. I do like Dalvin Cook. Again, he has to stay healthy. Laquan Treadwell, the first-round receiver they drafted, been moving up the charts, and they think he's going to see the field a bit more. I don't know if it's somebody I'll end up targeting, but would like to see more of him. And Minnesota, good defense. We know that and what they're capable of. Their running game is more or less what intrigues me. Green Bay, pick your poison. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is the best. He's going to cost a ton of money. I think he was the highest scoring DFS quarterback last year, if I'm not mistaken. But so many weapons there, and you got to get the right stack when you have them if you're trying to win a big tournament. The running game, what happens with Ty Montgomery? I know they're checking out. I actually played Jamal Williams, the kid from BYU that they drafted last year, tonight in preseason, but I'm kind of intrigued to see if he can kind of fill that running back void, and maybe they put Montgomery back at wide receiver, or they just go with what works. And, lastly, when you're talking about the NFC North, Bears, Vikings, Packers, Lions, Matt Stafford, no Megatron. That's a year removed, although I just did see a report teams are kicking the tires, seeing if he wants to come back and play football, which I find funny. But the running game situation, figuring out who's going to be the guy there. Theo Riddick is a PPR monster. Amir Abdullah, if he could stay healthy. It looked like he started getting stride and then got hurt last year. And then their wide receivers. Who are you looking at? Is this Eric Ebergier to kind of take that big step forward? So Let's start with you, Justin. Give me your thoughts on the NFC North, our final division.
I like Jordan Howard too. I don't know what the exact stat was. I've been doing so much research and homework, but I think in Mike Glennon's full stint when he was with Tampa a couple of years ago, almost a quarter of his completions were to tailbacks, I think. So you want to talk about a check down guy. Jordan Howard showed he has hands. If you're looking, PPR format, I like Jordan Howard too. And, they were on the wrong side of a ton of ball games, but they still stuck to the script and he got a lot of carries. So I'm not shying away from Jordan Howard either. Other than that, I don't know what the hell I'm doing with the Bears. Probably nothing. Ever, unless Cameron Meredith had a couple of weeks. But until you see what Mike Glennon likes and what he prefers, I don't know. I don't trust anybody but Jordan Howard. The Vikings, you gotta like Kevin Rudolph. Sam Bradford loves the tight ends. He's another guy who's hurt all the time. All these tight ends are always hurt, dude.
Quarterback leaving him hanging over the middle.
Yeah, Sam Bradford's good at that. Trust me, I watch a lot of Eagles games. So obviously, Kevin Rudolph, Dalvin Cook, had some reps tonight. It's interesting to see whenever he's going to slide into the road. I saw some really cool Stephon Diggs numbers when he was completely off the injury report, 110% healthy. His numbers were night and day. That's a guy who could do some damage. He was dinged up a ton of weeks last year. So I do think Stephon Diggs definitely has some late round value, and depending upon his price tag, I didn't have a chance to check what it is early on, but you might be able to have some guy with some serious upside there. Green Bay, Ty Montgomery is such a wild card now, especially in PPR formats. I'm willing to take a stab on him. I really am. I mean, maybe the kid Jamal Williams, maybe he takes over, and we saw how injury prone some of these receivers are, and maybe Montgomery's productive, so maybe they put him in the slot a little bit more. I don't think it's super risky with where Montgomery was getting drafted in annual leagues to take a shot at him. So that's pretty much what I got.
Sean, by the way, the Browns scored a touchdown. So
first and last of the year.
All right, give me your thoughts on the NFC North.
All right, so we all know what Aaron Rodgers can do. Basically, Jared Cook he had last year. It was night and day with what he had, but now Martellus Bennett, he's always just been a monster in my eyes. And Ty Montgomery, I mean, seems like he can do some damage out in the flat a little bit. We'll see how many times they target him. I don't know how popular he'll be to start, but it seemed like I don't know where to go with wide receiver. It seems just kind of risky with if all three of them are healthy. Adams, Cobb, and Nelson.
Yeah.
Bears, not really going to touch it. Maybe Jordan Howard if it's super interesting. They might just run the ball there just to get the games over. I don't know what's going to happen. Detroit, theoretic, he can get it in the flat a little bit. But I think it's interesting with Marvin Jones being ridiculously cheap with the upside he had. I mean, I know he's facing the Cardinals to start, but
he was two different receivers, right? Because in the first half he was blowing up, and everybody was, man, you got to get Marvin Jones in your lineup. And then I don't know what happened the last 7-8 games where it just seemed like he disappeared.
And then, the Vikings. I'm on team Dalvin Cook too, but we got to see. They have Latavius Murray, I believe, and he's been a weapon whenever he gets the touches. I mean, he didn't really get the touches in Oakland. And then, Rudolph, Captain Dink and Dump, Bradford.
Yeah.
That's about it.
All right. Well, just real quick to kind of go over some things. We were obviously just talking football and going through the divisions. And as I said earlier, with DFS, it just matters on the matchups and, where you think the targets are going to go, the weaknesses of the other teams. It all comes down. I think sports are all about that matchup. Boxing, baseball, basketball, and football more so than any. I want to just lastly with you guys, as far as defenses and kickers go on daily fantasy, it is something we can talk about. Are you punting kicker every week typically? Is there a defense that you target, or do you kind of map out your skill position players and see what you have left and finagle from there? Let me start with you, Sean, on just overall strategy regarding building a roster.
Kicker-wise, I mean, I play DraftKings, so I don't really have to worry about it. And then in season long, I just make sure I have one in there. But I mean, it depends on matchup. I mean, Tucker can drill him from really far, and I guess Phil Dawson's still alive, so I don't know how that's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, weather dependent too. I mean, just check that out all the time. I don't really know much.
What about you, Justin? Kickers. I mean, if you're playing on FanDuel, I should have stated that first because I was a FanDuel endorser I'm still endorsing FanDuel, and then when the merger was happening, I'm like, oh, it's cool. I can start playing DraftKings now, and then now it's not happening. So, give me your thoughts, Justin, on kickers and defense, real quick.
Man, I wish kickers weren't on FanDuel because I love their cash games. I just checked the contests out were open, and the big $2 double up. I think there's 40-something thousand entries, so top 40% is cashing. You're gonna have a lot of casual players in there. I mean, you could pile. I think there's a max of like 100 or 150 entries. So if you're trying to really double your money and play some chalk, that's a pretty good opportunity. But it sucks that, in my opinion, someone a position as variant as kickers is on the website. Now, I'm sure some people would argue with that, but really. The only things you can really look at, in my opinion, are the weather. You like a guy with clean weather, indoor kickers. Kickers fare well at Mile High. I look at teams that suck in the red zone. Try to pick out somebody who can maybe move the ball in a decent matchup, but one that normally doesn't capitalize in the red zone. Like for example, the Titans have been really good in the red zone. I'm never gonna roster Ryan Suckup unless there's some, God-forsaken foreseen reason that I would. But it's really that. And for defense, I'm a big, construct your lineup, get your core pieces in, find your value, and, try to find your sporadic quarterbacks. I try to find, personally, I try to find teams that have a good pass rush against a bad offensive line because that's when your quarterbacks get hurried and make the mistakes. A pick six changes the whole contest, man. You go from winning $25 to 75 with a pick six. And
yeah. I appreciate it, guys. So, look, we're going to be doing this pretty much every week, and then obviously once we get into daily fantasy, there will be the strategy will be thrown in. You'll be able to throw out some names that you like, their matchups, as opposed to just talking generically about each team. But appreciate Sean, Justin spending some time with us, and look forward to doing this again.
Yep.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Yep.
2 more weeks. See you.